All right, ESPN Baton Rouge, Matt Moscona on the Out of Bounds show, LSU Insider. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. We are the Out of Bounds show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, and we are brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be blue, the official healthcare provider of the Out of Bounds show, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. All right, Matt Moscona, hell of a job last week on the show. You thought Lane was going to take the job. Did this play out like you thought it would the last 4 or 5 days?
I think it played out like I thought it would, dating back to probably the last 14 days. And certainly the Friday before Thanksgiving, I think, is when Lane Kiffin and LSU, maybe we'll learn they had a verbal agreement. Maybe there was a signed MOU. It's a memorandum of understanding. It's non-binding, but it's a term sheet. But that's when confidence got supremely high over here, and it was more just a matter of making sure you push it across the finish line so Lane didn't have a change of heart. Now, the weekend, with when those meetings, were going to take place and when announcements were going to happen, I think a lot of that got pushed just on the time frame, especially when Keith Carter put out a statement that Lane would make a decision the Saturday after the Egg Bowl, and we didn't actually find out until Sunday. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, it was messy, like I think most people assumed it would be. But in the end, thought that Lane would end up at LSU, and he did.
Okay, so as this all played out, and you mentioned the week leading into the rivalry week, I mean, your confidence was sky high from the jump because LSU's a top 5 program. And I guess your thought process was he'll still leave a college football playoff team because LSU can. I mean, my God, y'all won national championships with Les Miles and Eddie O. And that tells me all I need to know about the strength of the program. Was that kind of the way you looked at it, Matt?
No, not really, Bo. I mean, I think some of those things are true, but I was confident because I knew of Lane Kiffin's interest and that LSU had passed Florida and that Lane Kiffin was looking to leave. And I know that's probably a hard thing for Ole Miss fans to hear today, and I'm very I'm sensitive to that, and it's in a weird way, Bo. LSU can kind of empathize because 20 years ago, LSU went through this with Nick Saban. He had won a national championship here. He loved it here. His family loved it here. LSU gave him every resource, but they couldn't provide the one thing at the point that he wanted, which he wanted to go scratch the NFL itch, and you just couldn't give him that, and so. It stung to watch him leave. I know the circumstances aren't exactly what and what, but to the point you just made, why would Lane Kiffin leave? Well, it's one thing to make a 12-team playoff. It's another to be able to consistently compete for and win a national championship or championships. And from my understanding, I think Lane is fearful that in the new, and you can hear him say this if you read between the lines of what he's saying, in the new NIL era, Lane's concern is that everything is going to revert to the way it was pre-NIL. Because you can't just go fund the Grove Collective now with $40 million and buy a roster. Every dollar, every NIL deal has to go through the clearinghouse. So you have to have a plan for how you're going to be able to get those dollars through the clearinghouse to the athletes. And I think that is probably, in Lane's mind, going to shift the balance of power back to the Blue Bloods. And LSU, Florida are in that mix, and I know that's hard for Ole Miss to hear, but Ole Miss isn't. I mean, they haven't won a conference championship in 6 decades. So there are some things that are just true, and I think that's ultimately what led Lane's decision.
Okay. As far as the staff, Frank Wilson's being retained. Is it official that Ed Ogeron has joined the staff, or what's the latest on that, Matt?
So I don't know that Frank Wilson is being retained.
Okay.
I think they would love to have Frank on staff, but it's my understanding that even though Kevin Smith, who's the running backs coach, who's been with Lane from FAU through Ole Miss almost a decade now, that even though he wasn't on the plane yesterday, that there's still a strong likelihood that he joins the staff. And so that would leave Frank Wilson up in the air. And as I understand, if Frank isn't an on-field coach, I don't know that he's interested in staying.
Okay.
And that could complicate things because, look, Richard Anderson, who's the number one defensive lineman in the country down in New Orleans, who's an LSU commit and sort of reaffirmed yesterday, I think he could very much be up in the air if Frank's not on staff. So that's one to watch. And then Ogeron, as I understand it, is in Baton Rouge right now. He has a house in Baton Rouge, but he's kind of back and forth with Baton Rouge and Florida. He's got a place down in Miami. But that has not been confirmed or official. And Bo, I haven't heard that from anybody at LSU. I know that's an agent creation. And I think his representation did a good job of pushing his name front and center, getting him back in the mix for jobs. You heard about him with Arkansas and Oregon State. I don't think any of that was legitimate interest from the schools. I think that's just an agent doing a good job of getting their client's name back out there. But the interesting thing about Ogeron is as I understand it, his buyout from LSU, the last payment is in December, is this month. So he needs to go work, and I think he's ready to work. And I think he would absolutely rejoin the LSU staff. But I have not heard from anyone at LSU that that's something. I know there was a Matt Zennis report about it, but I've not heard from anyone at LSU that that's something that is likely to or would happen.
Okay. What about the defensive coordinator position? Baker or someone else?
Yeah, I think there's a report this morning that Lane intends to retain Blake Baker. I don't have that confirmed, but I know that for our website, LouisianaSports.net, that we're working on writing that story right now. So, that was going to be Pete Golding. And my understanding, Bo, is that all throughout this process, Pete Golding was coming with Lane Kiffin. And I don't mind sharing that, it got to me through agent circles about a week and a half ago that Pete Golding had started making calls, just exploratory phone calls in different coaching circles, gauging interest on staff members that might join them in Baton Rouge. So that was the plan. No, Pete's from Hammond, which is about 30 miles east of Baton Rouge, and I think he was excited about the possibility of coming home. But the one thing that could prevent that or could change that was exactly what happened if he got the head coaching job, right, which did not seem like a possibility even 72 hours ago. But when Ole Miss was too late to the party on John Summerall, and the coaching carousel music stopped, the musical chairs, and everybody had a coach except Ole Miss, they didn't have a good option. And so I think they wisely promoted the popular assistant, which maybe ends up like a Zach Arnett situation. It's a 1-year deal to kind of give them a bridge to something more permanent, unless if it works. But yeah, I mean, I think I had a long way of answering your question, but anyway, I think the idea was always Pete Golding was going to join Lane, but now I think Blake Baker and much of his defensive staff, if not all of it, I think will be retained.
Okay. Matt Moscona, ESPN Baton Rouge, on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Were you surprised that they had to promote Pete, the way everything shook, because it was rapid fire? I know you were watching it, and people thought that Florida was well down the road with Summerall, and then all of a sudden, Goalish to Auburn and Silverfield to Arkansas. Did any of that surprise you that Ole Miss was left with promoting Pete Golding?
So, I mean, if you told me at the start of this process that's where they were going to land, I'd tell you yes. But what became pretty clear, and it's weird, like I don't cover Ole Miss, although I feel like over the last 6 weeks I have. But in the last sort of 72 hours, when it became really clear to Keith Carter that Lane Kiffin was leaving, which I still can't believe that he had that blind spot, that he didn't see this for weeks, that this was going to happen. But it's my understanding he took the path of trying to appease Lane Kiffin in hopes of convincing him to stay, and in so doing, didn't really in earnest begin his coaching search. And, I had someone very close to that program tell me, last week he could have gotten on a plane, gone to New Orleans to see John Summerall, but was worried of upsetting Lane Kiffin if he did that. And by the time Ole Miss tried to pivot and get engaged with John Summerall, and I know just being here in Louisiana, knowing a lot of people at both Tulane, Summerall, and at Ole Miss, that there were people who were calling John Summerall on Ole Miss's behalf, trying to get him to hold off on Florida to allow Ole Miss the opportunity to re-engage, but he had a bird in hand, and he was going to make $7.5 million at Florida, so he took the job that was there waiting on him. And that's probably a smart thing for him to do. But I think the big mistake that Keith Carter made was he somehow convinced himself that there was a possibility of Lane Kiffin staying, which, man, when you got a contract extension on your desk for 2 months and you don't sign it, I mean, actions speak louder than words. And I think that's what left Ole Miss in this really vulnerable position.
Wow. Matt Moscona, LSU insider on 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Okay, let's go to LSU. You're already a huge brand, right? You already have all the resources. I mean, y'all trip over about 15 to 20 high school recruits every year just from that state that are really good. I agree with you that some of these guys, if they can at Georgia and Ohio State and LSU, shift back to heavy high school, supplement with portal. Is that kind of where you were going about 5 minutes ago or so? You know, Lane had hit on the portal at Ole Miss. He was on the forefront. He was there. You know this. He had the vision. He was kind of a pioneer. Yeah. But you can't you're not going to hit on every single class. He looked at it like, hey, at LSU, I got 18 to 20 players every year. Compound that over 3 to 4 years, and then we supplement with the portal, and it's just an easier path. Is that where you were going earlier, Matt?
I think that's part of his thinking. And actually, you don't even need to hear me say it. If you heard what Nick Saban said on game day Saturday, yeah. I mean, like, where do you think he got that? I mean, Lane said he seeks the counsel of two people, Pete Carroll and Nick Saban. And so Nick on game day was telling you the conversations he's having with Lane, and how he has to keep rebuilding his roster every year through the portal, and how that's labor intensive and there's a lot of risk in that, and it's hard to maintain stability and build success upon that. So, yes, I mean, that is the appeal of a place like LSU. Now, Bo, the caveat here is Brian Kelly came here with that vision, was build through the high school ranks, supplement in the portal. And by his last year, he had gone full portal. I mean, this season, LSU had the #1 portal class in the country. And look what happened. I mean, the defense was outstanding this year, the top 10 defense in the country, but the offense imploded. They didn't go heavy enough on the offensive line. They were way too heavy on skill guys. They had an injury at quarterback, and it blew up offensively, got everybody fired. So I think it remains to be seen how the evolution of the new NIL era will continue. But if Lane's right, and we do see college football revert to the way it was pre-NIL in this new NIL era, you know, with the clearinghouse, then it stands to reason it would shift back to that model. And then you do have a great advantage being in Louisiana. Is
that where you see it going? Where Lane believes that it's going?
I don't know. I'm kind of the belief that if you have wealthy boosters that want to funnel cash to kids, they'll find a way to do it.
Absolutely.
But maybe, Bo, maybe that's indicative of the way things were when you did have $100 handshakes and brown paper bags of cash and things like that. I mean, and in that era, you still had the blue bloods, right? So I don't know. I think it's fascinating to watch, but I think even more so than NIL, the transfer portal complicates things because, you know, you can sign a great high school class, but every year on average, a quarter of your roster enters the portal. So if you sign a great high school class, after 2 years, half of that high school class isn't on your roster anymore. So I think just there's so much unknown about roster building. And I don't have a great answer of what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. But also, and you know this better than I do, Matt, LSU has the ability to retain guys more so than other schools because so many of them grow up wanting to play for LSU. So maybe if they don't play right out, I know everybody wants to just hit the portal if they don't play day one. I just feel like LSU, Georgia, and Ohio State and a couple others, especially when they're the only school in the state, that they have an advantage to retain guys for a little bit longer, even than some of their blue bloods that they compete against? How do you see it?
No, I think that's right. And, I always point out that and I use the three schools that you just said. It's always LSU, Ohio State, Georgia. But LSU's advantage is the dirt. It's the only Power 5 in a talent-rich state. I mean, there's schools like Arkansas, which is the only Power 4 in its state, but there's no talent in Arkansas. Louisiana and Georgia, with respect to Georgia Tech, but I think we understand Georgia and Georgia Tech aren't the same.
Right.
And then Ohio State, but there are examples to the contrary, Bo, where this era has a lot. Like I'll give you a great example. A few years ago, Lance Hurd was a 5-star offensive lineman coming out of Neville in North Louisiana. He signs with LSU. It was a big get. Went to the same high school as Will Campbell. They were a year apart. So Lance Hurd comes to Baton Rouge to LSU for a season. He's behind Will Campbell, and then transfers to Tennessee. Well, now he's been Tennessee starting left tackle the last 2 years. This year, LSU's offensive line was maybe the worst I've ever seen it. In a different era, Lance Hurd, as a redshirt sophomore, third-year player, would have been in line to replace Will Campbell, a kid from the state, 5-star, all that sort of stuff. Instead, LSU had to go further down the depth chart. So Walker Howard's another great example of that. Was a highly regarded quarterback who was a legacy, came to LSU for a season, ended up transferring to Ole Miss. We know his story now is at UL Lafayette. But I think there's certainly examples of guys who will stay and will wait their turn. But I think there's also, in this era, the opportunity for some of those guys to take a payday and leave. So I don't know that it's as cut and dried as it once was.
All right. So Billy Glasscock, it looks like Austin Thomas and Billy Glasscock may be switching roles here. Lane brought Glasscock with him. Austin Thomas could join Ole Miss again. Golding's familiar with him. You heard anything on that front, Matt?
Yeah, I would be really surprised if Austin Thomas were retained. And I like Austin a lot.
Yeah, sure.
I think professionally he's really smart and very good at what he does. And personally, I think he's just an outstanding person. But my understanding is that marriage between Austin and Lane and Oxford maybe didn't end great. And I think there was this assumption here from a lot of people, a lot of maybe LSU fans. Oh, great, they have a relationship, they'll retain Austin. I'm like, did you ever think of why Austin left Ole Miss? So, yeah, and look, Billy Glasscock coming here, that's the writings on the wall that Lane's bringing his GM, who I understand is also a really smart guy and very good at what he does. But, yeah, I don't know about Austin going back to Oxford. I haven't heard that and I haven't spoken to Austin. But yeah, I would not anticipate Austin Thomas being retained. That would be a big surprise to me if he were.
How do you see this going with LSU and the brand power that they have, and Kiffin and the big energy and social media platform that he has? How do you see these two merging together, Matt Moscona?
Well, it's going to be fascinating. I mean, LSU over the last, I would really say since the 2019 season. But if you remember, one of the things that team was amazing. People always talk about, but if you remember, one of the parts of that season that became one of the most anticipated things, every Thursday they drop a hype video, and all those hype videos started going viral. I mean, that was the genesis of everybody doing those hype videos. And LSU literally has a department in the athletic department called The Brand. I mean, they created an entire department just about that and how they accentuate those three letters, the LSU brand, internationally. And that goes from Olivia Dunn and Angel Reese being on the cover of SI, and Olivia Dunn and Paul Skeens, LSU's got track athletes that are internationally transcendently famous, like Lolo Jones, Mondo Duplantis, Sha'Carri Richardson. I mean, LSU's done a fantastic job of accentuating that brand. And Lane Kiffin, you would assume, will fit in seamlessly because he's one of those guys, love or hate, everybody across the college football and sports landscape knows who Lane Kiffin is and they have an opinion on him. And I would imagine that LSU and Lane will capitalize on that pretty pretty significantly here for as long as he's the coach.
And y'all are permanent opponents, LSU and Ole Miss.
Oh, my God.
And LSU goes to Ole
next
Miss next year.
Oh, that is going to be – Bo, I was at Tiger Stadium in 2000. I mean, I've seen a lot of games in Tiger Stadium in my life. And in 2008, when Nick Saban came back for the first time, I've never seen an environment that was so just riddled with hate. I mean, it was just – there's one thing when it's it's a rival and, there's a lot of nervous excitement and energy for an important game. That was just a different level of vitriol. And there was a buffer. Remember, Nick didn't leave LSU for Alabama. He went to Miami to go with the Dolphins. And so you had a buffer there, but it was still like that. I can't imagine what it'll be like in Oxford next year when you're talking about Lane, middle of the playoff run, not just leaving, but leaving for a conference rival that Ole Miss, I think, kind of always feels is more on par with LSU than State, maybe how Ole Miss has viewed it as that big rivalry. I can't even. I'd tell you this: I'm not going to be in Oxford for that. I'm going to watch that from the comfort and safety of my own house next year.
Oh my gosh! Do you feel like you could do? I've only got a minute here. Do you feel like you could do like 7 hours of your show today?
Oh man, I did well over 7 hours of live streams this weekend. So I mean, I could turn on a live stream right now and just go for the entire day, and I would never it would never stop being interesting.
Oh my gosh, this is crazy. Matt Moscona, ESPN Baton Rouge on the Out of Bounds show. Matt, thanks so much, my friend. We appreciate it, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Okay, Bo. Anytime, man.
Matt Moscona on the Out of Bounds show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, brought to you by Total Transportation of Mississippi, offering nationwide and regional routes right now. Apply today. TotalMS.com. Weekly pay, bonuses, full benefits, frequent home time, all powered by Total Transportation of Mississippi. You can apply online. It's right there on looking at it. TotalMS.com. TotalMS.com. Frequent pay, monthly bonuses, weekly pay, loaded benefits, all powered by Total Transportation of Mississippi, offering nationwide and regional routes. TotalMS.com. Lunch today brought to you by Burgers Blues Barbecue, B3, Dogwood, Flowwood. Beautiful restaurant. That building's awesome. B3, Burgers Blues Barbecue, B3 in Dogwood, Flowwood. The lunch today is fried chicken. I'd go a side of mac and cheese and green beans. Onion rings are fabulous, too. And we got those last week as I got Jackson a Highway 61 bacon and blue burger from Burgers Blues Barbecue, B3 in Dogwood, Flowwood. You cannot miss it. And Tom Luganbill at 9:30 on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line.